instead of trying to clap on time, what would happen? And dude, you got to cut all of this out when you're editing. But what if I just started counting 1, 2, 3, and then you joined me in the counting?
Up to
Wouldn't
what?
that
Like
be
10?
easy to? Yeah, let's just count to 10. Wouldn't that make it easy
All right,
to
sure.
sync
I guess
up?
that makes it a little easier. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, here I go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
All right.
Okay. I just started my video too, so
Okay.
I don't know if you have yours going.
Would you just start it when you did the 3, 2, 1 earlier?
No, I just started it now.
Wait, but
15 seconds ago.
You didn't start it when you were counting?
No, I'm sorry. Let me.
We need to do
here,
that
I'll
again,
do
then.
something. No, well, I'll snap my fingers,
Oh, okay.
and you'll see my fingers snap.
Okay, that works.
Okay,
that
here.
works.
Right. 3, 2, 1, snap.
Okay, I think that's. So we ended up going back to that anyway.
All right, so you can sync the video, sync both of our audio.
Yes. Okay.
And for the love of God, please edit all of this out.
When you say that, it makes me want to not edit it out, but I don't know if there's anything funny enough to keep in. So I'll say.
Definitely not. People don't want to hear this. Trust me.
Hello. Immediate disclaimer. Apologies. I'm feeling a little under the weather, so apologies for any gross cold noises or fluids that I have to extract from my body while we're recording. And thank you in advance, and thank you for tuning in to Two LPs in a Pod, which is a YouTube show and a podcast where I am joined by my fellow music nerd and longtime friend, Shawn, and we recommend music to each other, 2 albums per episode under a central theme. This episode's theme is debut albums. Shawn, my man, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, and I'm quite excited for this episode, as I am for all of them, because debut albums are kind of like one-hit wonders or one-album wonders. It's a topic that intrigues me when a band or group comes out of the gate strong. It's always interesting to see. And as usual, I tried a little bit to come out of my comfort zone and choose an album that I knew about but I had never really listened to, because I don't know if you are cool with doing this, but I have probably about 700 honorable mentions when I think of debut albums.
Wow, that's interesting. Go for it.
Well, I just, there's so many good ones. Like,
so hold
Van
on.
Halen
So
1.
like, are you just gonna list every debut album ever, or like?
No. Like, just a few that come to mind instantly would be Van Halen 1, The Strokes, the Yeah Yeahs, Elvis Costello. I'll leave it at that. That's a few of my favorites.
Wait, so those.
What about you?
Those were ones that you were considering for this episode. They're just your favorites in general.
No, because like I said, I'm not the best at this when we choose albums, but I really do try to pick something that I'm not like super ultra familiar with. So I could gush about Van Halen 1 for a half hour, but it wouldn't be me like kind of struggling through my feelings and criticize. It wouldn't be unbiased, let's just say, because I love that band and that album so much, and same with the Strokes, and yeah. So yeah, I have many albums that are just great debut albums, and some you could say where the artist peaked and never repeated their greatness with that first album. Pearl Jam is another one. So yeah, I don't know. Do you have any like that are just like, oh, instantly you think of debut albums and you have a few that you can?
Rage Against the Machine comes to mind, but that almost feels like an easy answer.
Nice. No, that's what I'm talking about is easy answers. That's because I didn't choose an easy answer for this show, so that's why I'm I'm curious, what are your easy answers?
Well, I did choose an easy answer, to be honest. But the next episode we do, I have an artist in mind that I've never listened to, so I can make that switch. But favorite debut albums.
Okay.
It's interesting what you said about like an artist like starts off strong and their debut is like kind of like their highest peak, and like that almost is bittersweet to me, you know. Like I almost don't want to have that like in the back of my pocket ready to know.
Yeah, it is, I don't know if disappointing is the right word, but bittersweet is a nice way to put it. But I mean, most bands, even the bands that come out of the gate, man, imagine being a band with a really strong first album and then none of the rest of your albums are any good.
That does happen a lot, to be honest.
I wonder, like, what examples can you think of? I can only think of one, and it's not that the rest of their albums are not good. It's just that I don't like them, and it's the band 4 Year Strong. Their debut album, Rise or Die Trying, I think is the title. It's an album from 2007, is absolute banger masterpiece of pop punk. I love that album front to back, and I have tried multiple times to get into any one of their other albums, and I don't like any of them, only that first one. But they're not bad albums, they're just not for me, so I want to make that clear.
That's fair.
But what's an example of a band that only has one, the debut album is their only good album?
I'm drawing a blank. I feel like it happens a lot with like bands that like it's definitely more of like a one hit wonder kind of thing. Like I feel like there are definitely bands that are one album wonders. But like like when I'm thinking of like artists that I like go back to over and over, like it tends to be I'm having a hard time putting it into words. Like a Kendrick Lamar, like even though his debut is not great, like artists like that can like develop over time. Like they don't just like catch lightning in a bottle, you know? So I feel like albums where it's truly just like one album and then they're done, they kind of leave my headspace after not too long, maybe.
I got it. Well, now that I'm a certified YouTuber, I'm going to do something we don't usually do. I'm going to solicit comments. Let us know in the comments, what's an example of a group that peaked with their first album and then didn't really put out anything good after that? Because I'm curious. I'm sure I could think of some examples if I looked around. And actually, all the lists I read of great debut albums, I'm sure there's a few examples there.
There must be.
But most bands, most groups that I can think of that I love their debut album, they have at least some. Even like the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, they've fallen off. They fell off at a certain point, but their first, like, I would say 3 albums are incredible.
I love Fever to Tell a lot more than the rest of their albums, I will say.
I agree. But yeah, I'm just hard pressed to think of a band that just totally fell off after a first great album. But I think we should get into your album, which is the first one we're going to discuss today. So tell us a little about it, how you selected it, unless you want to.
One final thought.
Something else.
You know, obviously, a lot of people will say that, you know, what you said happens, where like the sophomore slump, as it's called. And the quote that I've heard that always like sticks with me is that you take your entire life to write your first album, but then you only take a couple of years to write your second album.
Yes, I've heard that before. I can't remember who said it, but that is a great point.
You know, just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's kind of like, how many albums do you have? Like,
that's
right?
true. Yeah,
like,
you know, like
good, bad, or indifferent. Like, it takes a lot to put yourself out there as an artist. We've talked about this before. You know, one hit wonders, one album wonders, especially one hit wonders. How many hits do I have? I have 0.
Yeah.
I'm a 0 hit wonder.
So we're not on.
I wish I had one. Right. So, Yeah, debut albums. Now, I didn't realize this. You are actually familiar with this group that you chose, so tell me about it.
Yes. So I forget. You mentioned in the last episode this idea of the show being more for like branching out, whereas I was still in a phase of wanting to pick comfort albums. So I went with another comfort album, but also like a band that I want to talk about, like not the most well-known debut album ever by any means. So this is a band called Foals from the UK, and this is their debut album, Antidotes, released in 2008. It is I would primarily say an indie rock album, but also very much a math rock album too. And I have listened to most of Foals' albums. They still release albums. I think they released one this year, but I haven't listened to it. This is kind of a case of, I don't want to say a band peaking with their debut, but they had a very interesting and kind of weird sound on this album. Like, it's indie, it's dancey, it's poppy, it's catchy, but it's pretty mathy. Like, it's kind of weird. Like, it's like fidgety. And as they've gone on, they've definitely just gone more towards like a straightforward indie rock approach, and now they do like electronic. But they definitely kind of like dropped the mathiness along the way. So while they have released great albums since this one, like truly and honestly, I think they've released really good stuff since this album. I kind of like wonder what could have been, you know, like what if they like took this weird sound even further? And you know, like I say that, and back to like the thing about I have no albums at all. Like I can't like give constructive criticism, you know. I don't know what it would have looked like if they kept doing this sound and kept pushing it forward. So I'm complaining without providing a solution, but still they gave us a great album, and I wish I think it's pretty unique, honestly, too. So I wonder what they could have done if they kept going in this direction.
Right. And I didn't realize they're actually still active. And
they are, yes.
I have had a few different members come and go, but they've mostly stayed intact with a few of these dudes, which is pretty cool. And it looks like they have 7 albums or 6. I don't know if Everything Not Saved Will Be Lost. Do people call that 2 albums?
It's 2 albums.
Or is that
I would call it 2
one
albums.
Oh,
it's like
okay.
a double album, I guess.
So
but they released it in 2 different parts.
Okay. So that's interesting. I didn't really take the time to listen to anything of this group that came after. But this album was interesting to me because knowing, again, I like to go into our albums as blind as I can. I usually don't do too much research on a group, even if I'm creating the notes for.
You seem like you do a lot of research. That's interesting.
Show. Yeah, a lot of times it's just, you know, jumping into the band's Wikipedia, pulling the track list, pulling who produced it and all that stuff. But I'd rather listen to it first if I can to just get a completely cold and blind feel for the music. Oh man, I just hit my keyboard again. You're still going? All right, cool. So this album kind of surprised me because based on the cover art, which never judge an album by its cover,
I love the album
I guess.
Art too.
I think it's pretty cool.
Oh, okay.
I like it. It's a little, in a way, it's a little eerie, a little unsettling. Kind of like the music. You use the word off kilter. The cover art is a tad off kilter.
I didn't say that, so you get brownie points. I said like fidgety or weird.
Oh, fidgety is a good word. I was expecting kind of a cold acoustic indie style record.
Oh, acoustic.
Like
okay.
a Bon Iver or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So when this came on and it sounded like Block Party, I was like,
you think it sounds like
cool.
It kind of sounds like Block Party, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit, bro. So I got to say this album.
Wait. I'm so sorry. Block Party is a perfect example of a band that dropped a debut album and then like they never reached that height again.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on. I do like that first album. Not an expert on the rest of their body of work, but I'm gonna take your word for that because nobody ever talks about any of their other albums.
Sorry, go on.
No, that's a good point though. So the vibe I got with this album was somewhat of that, and I thought, wow, this album is really like kind of its time. I even watched the music video for Cassius, and I was like, wow, look at these guys with their, like, they look like a bunch of hipsters. They got these god awful haircuts, the way they're dressing, and like the music video itself was like just this weird like wannabe arty kind of thing with like meat and stuff. And I don't. It's funny the way I'm talking about it sounds like I'm really poo-pooing the whole shebang, but I'm really not. Like I don't have anything against these guys, but I was like really taken back to that time when all this like kind of hipster, angular, guitar-y guys in flannels music
I see what you mean.
Was around, like, you know, Vampire Weekend and Block Party and all those bands. And as I listened to the album, I had this kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but I enjoyed it while I was listening to it, but I couldn't recount any single melody. I didn't want to playlist any of these songs, and I hardly can name any favorite songs. The whole album, despite its jittery and off-kilter feel, was actually kind of just on an even keel for me from start to finish, and nothing kind of stood out. And I think maybe I'm spoiled by how math rock has progressed and how much Midwest emo I listen to and all this, you know, guitar. Midwest emo was almost a joke in like the TikTok sphere before how guitar-y it is. That's a really bad word, but you know, it's almost a joke. It's a cliche. The like tapping guitar,
it's
and
very
masturbatory
to like say a vulgar word.
Yeah, exactly. So this is like a dance punk album with that kind of stuff sprinkled into it, and it almost just kind of, as jittery and angular and all those things that it is, it's almost subdued in comparison to what's out now. And I'm actually starting to realize that, because the music now is so hyper stimulating and so over the top and competitive in that way. It's kind of weird to listen to something like this where it's used more sparingly. So that is a very long-winded way to say I liked this. I liked it to listen to while I worked. I listened to both of our albums today 2 times front to back. And
wow, you wake up early.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Not today. Both the albums we're covering today, I listened to twice.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. And then re-listened to as I watched some music videos and some live performances. But I will say, didn't dislike this album at all. But I also didn't go into the bonus tracks on Spotify. There's a whole bunch of different bonus tracks, and I was like, oh, I should check these out. Are these any good? And I started listening to them, and I was just like, all right, this is just kind of more of the same. Nothing's standing out to me. No, it's not very hooky music. And, you know, I like hooky music. I like something that keeps me singing along, something that has me coming back, like power choruses and all that other stuff. And there's definitely none of that here. And that doesn't make it bad. It just means that's the stuff that lights me up. And they don't have that kind of stuff.
That's fair. They definitely don't do power choruses. It's funny because I think a lot of the guitar lines are really catchy. So what you're saying about like it kind of like being like kind of like one, I will agree that the album is a bit one note. Did you notice anything interesting about the guitar playing is my question first.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was really tight. I liked I love 2-hand tapping. I'm into it. Even when I see people making fun of it on TikTok and all that stuff, like that's some of my, I mean, I talked earlier about how much I love Van Halen, but I like,
that's true.
I like Hella, I like Marnie Stern, I like all these guitarists who utilize these techniques. And again, Foals is not out there to shred. They're out there to accentuate the music with those techniques, if that makes sense. So that's, and I think they did it well. So,
while those bands and artists are valid comparisons, I would actually say that Foals, I mean, you're right, they don't shred. Like, the guitar playing skillfully is not the impressive thing. So here's the thing. This album and the interview that I can't find, apparently there's no guitar chords on the album at all. It's only single notes, and they do a bunch of like multi-tracking to make it sound like a bunch of different things is going on. So basically that's the gimmick of the album, and to an extent the band. So I think like some people, it kind of just gets stale really fast, but I think it's like simultaneously such a simple and clever and funny idea that's also just like half baked. But right. I think they do a really good job. Like, I think they have such a unique sound on this album that's so fun, and it's like one of those things where, like, if a guitarist is like insane, they just kind of like become, oh, that guy's like on a different dimension as me. Like, I can never do what he's doing, you know? Like, that's crazy. But these guys aren't playing anything that insane. It's more like, oh, like that's such a simple idea. Like, why didn't I think of that? You know, like it's right. It's pretty easy, but they put their own spin on it, and they do kind of do it the whole time. But I just happen to think it's really, really interesting and really fun.
Well, I'm really glad you explained that, because that explains why it didn't hook me, because chords and chord progressions are what hooks you into music a lot of the time. So that makes a ton of sense, and that's actually makes it way more interesting for me, and it makes me want to listen to
it
again. So
I hope you enjoy it.
Maybe I would appreciate it more knowing that, but I certainly didn't pick up on that. But when you say it, it makes complete sense. Oh yes, that's why. There's no chords at all. So in the I swear I read like the main guitarist said this, but I couldn't find it after like 15 minutes of searching yesterday. He said something like, someone interviewed him and asked him about the chord thing, and he was like, oh, we wanted it to sound like a bunch of different like insects or something, or like bees or like flies like darting around you like this way and that way, and then it becomes like a harmonious thing. That it kind of sounds pretentious when I'm saying it back, but I think they achieved their goal admirably. Very interesting. I'm definitely gonna at least listen to a couple tracks from this album again and go back to it. And now I also want to see what the rest of their catalog sounds like. You actually have persuaded me back into the Foals fold.
Dude, okay.
Into the Foals fold.
I will say that if you're not a huge fan of this album because it lacks like some more like I can't think of the right word. Just like some more familiar like song structures, I would recommend Total Life Forever, which is the immediate follow-up to this album. That's a very, very good album. And then Everything Not Saved Part 1 is also very, very good. And they're much less weird.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, I think I've said most of everything I could say about this album. Did you have any other things you wanted to add before we go to the next one?
This is a great album. This is probably my favorite album that we have discussed on the show so far, honestly. I love this band.
Wow. Okay. Yeah,
this is one of those bands that I think is underrated, especially this album. I think this is such a unique and special album. This does feel like lightning in a bottle, but I think the band was able to like put out a fulfilling discography afterwards. But they did something kind of like special on this album that I don't think they or any other band has exactly replicated.
Dude, that's awesome. And one thing we didn't talk about, I'll just throw it in at the end here, is there's a lot of horn work and orchestral
there is a
instruments, some strings, some horns, and again, used tastefully and sparingly. I think it's not like, it's not like a ska band where the horns are just overbearing. They're used very like tastefully. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and it's funny. I think when we covered Sunny Day Real Estate, you said they sounded like a band that we would see live at those clubhouse shows we used to go to with the local bands. And when the horns came in on the first track, I got that vibe.
Really? We've never. No one has played a brass instrument at like those clubs, right?
I don't think so. I think you should. If you plumb the depths of your memory, you'll remember a few bands that did that. So, that's the vibe, and not like, oh, this sounds like some band that could play a local show, but it was just that. That's
dude. I kind of that's not a insult in my mind. That's like that just makes it more relatable. Like it's more down to earth. Like,
yeah.
These are just some regular dudes that happen to be good at music and had a really good idea.
Yeah, exactly. Cool, man. Well, I'm glad that you picked this, even though, and hell, dude, I don't care if you pick your favorite album of all time to cover. There's no rules with the. I just, I listen to new music every day. I'm still doing the one new album a day thing. I'm in the 300. I think I've listened to like 320 albums.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I started in March, and we're now in November as we record this. So sometimes it's more than one album a day. I've listened to 3 or 4 albums in a day.
Wait, but does that mean you go 3 or 4 days without listening then afterwards?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Minimum one album a day.
Okay, there you go.
And if anybody wants to see the progress here or see these albums, it's at RFG Playcast on Twitter. I tweet every album that I listen to. So
you X every album.
Dude, I'm never going to call it X. So, yeah, if anybody is interested, I also have it on a Google spreadsheet that I'm tempted to just make public.
Dude, you need to freaking get on Album of the Year, all right? Fuck this Google spreadsheet shit.
Okay. Album of the Year. I thought it was Rate Your Music I need to be on.
Wow, you know what? You caught me in a moment of like sincerity. You should get on both, but I said Album of the Year. I didn't say Rate Your Music.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, if you're ready, we can move on to album number 2, which was my pick for.
Yes. Yes. Go ahead.
All right. So a debut album that I wanted to check out was one that I've heard about for a long time. And although I've heard some of this band's music, they're a band that I'm mostly unfamiliar with one exception. And the band is the Jesus and Mary Chain, and their first album, Psychocandy, was released in 1985. And it is also classified under the gigantic umbrella of indie rock, but it is more influenced by I don't even know if it was called shoegaze at the time. It's a little early in the history, but
I would definitely call it noise rock,
shoegaze, with some 60s pop influence. In fact, there was some review that I read. I don't know, it might be on the Wikipedia here that I have in front of me, but the review was like, oh, this is just 60s pop drowned in reverb, which kind of it is. But this is a band that is pretty well known in indie rock, the indie rock discussion. But I've never listened to them, with the one exception of the song Head On from the album that came after this was covered by the Pixies. So I like the Pixies version of that song, and I like the original version of that song. They're both good. But I've never really taken the time to listen to an album from this band front to back. And I thought, well, I really like that song Head On. Why don't we take Psychocandy Head On and we'll listen to that. Wow, that's so
interesting that what you just explained as your logic to pick albums for this show. We really have philosophies.
I've had just a little taste of this group, and I know they're well known, so I thought let's add this to my musical acumen and experience. So, and this album as well, like as I mentioned, I listened to this maybe I listened to it twice front to back, and I didn't like this album as much as I hoped I would.
Okay.
I feel like it starts off strong. I like Just Like Honey, but much like Foals, just in a completely different way, it just plays, and it is noise rock, it is shoegaze ish, and it's just there's a lot of droning guitars, and the hooks and vocal melodies are there. This album is definitely more hooky than Foals, and there's some more catchy parts. But man, it just made me wish I was listening to Echo and the Bunnymen or The Cure or something
That's funny.
more poppy. You know what I mean? So, and again, that's just my personal bias. So I'm, people love this band and love this album. It's very highly rated. And I was reminded by it looking at a list of best debut albums. So, in general, both albums that we're discussing today were I'm lukewarm on both of them, unfortunately. Glad I listened to them, didn't dislike them. There's albums I listen to on my daily quests that I'm like, oh God, I'm stuck with this. I rarely bail on an album unless it's just absolutely miserable to me. And neither one of these albums today was like that, but both of these bands are I don't know if you're going to convince me to go listen to more Jesus and Mary Chain like you did with Foals, but I'm going to pass it over to you now, because now I'm kind of trailing off into obscure thoughts here. What was your impression? What's your history with this band, etc.?
So my history with this band is probably even less than yours. I know of them. I've maybe heard a song by them in the past. I don't even know. But the name is known to me. So when you recommended it, I thought you knew more of the band. So it's interesting to hear that you didn't. And what you said earlier about Foals being a band we could hear at the clubhouse, this sounds way more like a band I think we could have heard at the clubhouse.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit torn. I think I'm overall in the same boat as you, and there's a couple things I want to break down. First is the noise shoegaze aspect, because it's funny to me that you say this is a catchier album than Foals, because I guess maybe song structure wise it is, but it is noisy as hell. That's a persistent thing about this album. There really is a lot of reverb and feedback. It's almost similar to what you said last time about the last episode about Snow Strippers, where it gave you ear fatigue by the end. I almost think that, but then at the same time, I can't really describe why, but I kind of like it. I kind of enjoy having this on in the background, and I don't have a great reason for that. An anecdote that I'd like to share is that I don't know if it was in the year 2019, but this discussion was in the year 2019, but in the year 2019, there were these two bands that are also indie rock that are very that are pretty underground. So I don't know if you know them, but they're called Glass Beach and Weather Day.
I don't know them.
So they both released, coincidentally, also their debut albums that year. And Glass Beach is really fun and chipper and peppy indie rock, and Weather Day is kind of like this, really noisy. And I was talking to my friend Himmy, who's also a music nerd, and I was like, dude, the Glass Beach album is way better. How could you like the Weather Day album more? And he was like, the Weather Day album makes my ears hurt. And I don't know why, his response, that was his genuine response. I was like, oh, something about that made me understand why people like noise music. And that's kind of how I feel about this album. There's honestly, when you take away the feedback and the noise, there isn't really a lot that I would enjoy about this album. That's the main thing that I enjoy. And even then, it's kind of I would have to warn someone if I was going to recommend this album, but I just like it. I don't know why. I can't put my finger on it.
To me, yeah, what you were just explaining is why I like Machine Girl.
Oh,
right?
that's so funny.
Because,
I totally like Machine Girl for different reasons than that.
oh, okay. I like Machine Girl because the music is just loud, abrasive, annoying, like, and
I would never
and
call it annoying. That's so funny.
oh, okay. Like a lot of people might
I
dislike
could see
it.
that, yeah.
And listening to it for long periods of time can be exhausting, but I absolutely
That is
love
definitely true. But I think in a different way. I don't know why.
Oh yeah, totally different way. I wouldn't even compare. I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying Machine Girl sonically is
Okay.
in any way similar to Jesus and Mary Chain. Just those characteristics that you were just describing of the reason that some people would say Psychocandy is just droning, annoying, is the reason you like it. Like, I totally get that, just not so much for this album. I actually wish they, like I alluded to earlier, I wish they had leaned more on those 50s and 60s pop influences that are present in the song structures. And not for nothing, I like noisy stuff. I like droning guitar tones. I play guitar. I love different effects pedals. It's just when I think of noise, when I want to hear noise, I do tend to lean into things that are more more annoying, just more abrasive. When I think of noise, I think of extreme dynamics, right? Again, to mention a band like Hella, right? Like their earlier work.
Yeah. Well, that's almost different because like they're such good instrumentalists.
True. And again, when I mention a band, it's not to compare Hella to Jesus and Mary Chain. It's just to say like the characteristics of what I would consider noisy music or noise rock. And I know we get into, not we, but people can get into micro genres and, oh, that's not noise. This isn't ambient third wave noise. What are you talking about? Like I'm just using adjectives here. And it's, I don't know, like I guess I could never really get into shoegaze for that reason, because it's just a flavor of guitar music that doesn't click with me. Now, having said that, you might say, well, you knew this was an album that is influential to the shoegaze genre. Why would you pick it? And it's because the song Head On, which, like I said, was the previous only exposure that I've ever had to this group, is not some shoegazy, noisy, drony song. It's a rock and roll song. So I figured the album would be kind of what it is, which is, again, 50s and 60s pop songs washed out with reverb, to paraphrase the one review that I read. It just didn't quite get into that poppy realm enough. It had one foot too far into the noisy realm and not enough in the poppy realm.
That is just a weird combination too. Sorry, go ahead.
It is. It's a good combination, I would say. I just wanted to say I didn't hate it. I like you, Dottie. Like. So.
Yeah, like personally, I like a lot of noisy music. Like I love Hella. I've actually been revisiting them lately. They're so killer. I love Machine Girl. Like I love Black Midi. Like there's a lot of noisy bands that you could just, Machine Girl's not rock, but there's a lot of like noise rock bands that I like, but there's always something that has to like, those are not ambient bands. This I kind of view as an ambient album, honestly. Like it's great to listen to while working because it just sits in the background, and that's honestly as good as it's gonna get for me. But like if I try to dissect it, I really just don't like. These guys are not drumming as hard as Zach Hill. They're not
right.
as weird as Machine Girl. They're not like coming through with crazy song structures like Black Midi. Like it's really just the feedback, and that kind of like, no disrespect, it's just not my genre. Like I don't like really. I can't think of an alternative to even recommend to this album. It's just not my cup of tea.
Yep. I agree. I think And I've never gotten into shoegaze. Like,
I do like shoegaze though. I think that's a bit different. Actually, the very first episode of the show, Parannoul, that like those 3 bands, that was kind of a
true.
shoegaze album. Yeah.
Word. Yeah, I agree. Also, shout out to Hella. I know we brought him up a bunch, but like,
Hella
talk about a band.
so sick.
Like we have on our notes concept albums as a topic. How about concept bands? Right? They add a member they add a member to the band every album they make.
Is that intentional? I didn't even know, dude. I've been listening. Okay, we're going off a tangent, but like you recommended what's their first album called? It has a funny name too.
Oh, Hold Your Horse Is?
Yeah, Hold Your Horse Is. As you recommended that to me, like back in now that we have told people what the pound days are, but back when we used to work in an animal pound together, which was like at this point many years ago. And I was not ready to like appreciate. Like I don't remember what my initial reaction was, but I totally forgot that album like in the years since. And I was definitely not ready to appreciate it. So I don't know why I revisited it recently, and it is insane, dude. Like Zach Hill is like he's on another universe, man. I don't know what the fuck he's on. And the guitarist is really good too.
Yeah, agreed. I think, in the conversation of drummers, and I actually saw, I'm not a fan of Mark Maron, but I saw a TikTok of him, and he was like, somebody was asking him who's the best guitarist, and he went off on a little tirade of there's no such thing as best guitarist. There's no best anything, but it's still fun to talk about like who's the best quote unquote drummer. And
I want to give him his respect, man. He's an insane drummer.
Yeah,
I want to shout him out.
He's just cracked out. Every album he's on is amazing, and he elevates.
Every album he's on is amazing. He's the drummer for Death Grips, right?
Wait, he's in Death Grips? No way.
Wait, did you not know that?
No, I'm just trolling you. Of course I know he's in
Fuck
Death
you.
Grips. But again, to bring up Marnie Stern again, he drums on a couple of her albums.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow, that totally
elevates those projects just by being on them. You know what I mean? So, and he produced a couple of her albums. So, but yeah,
concept band.
What's that?
Concept band. I didn't know that.
I just made that up. I don't know if they, like you said, did they do that on purpose? I have no idea. But think about how like meta that is. Like every album.
That sounds like something that someone associated with Death Grips would try to do, honestly.
Exactly. That's just the kind of thing they would do. So anyway, we should just do 2 Hella albums next episode.
well, hold on.
Topic
you recommended
Hella.
you recommended freaking singer-songwriter. Do you still not want to do? I mean, the next episode basically is your pick for the topic now.
Okay. Let's chat about that. But do you have any final thoughts on Psychocandy?
I think I've said said all I want to say. It is.
Yeah, that's
I would
fair.
say overall I like it more than I dislike it, but it's only wallpaper for me. Like I like it in the background.
That's a good word.
That's about it.
Yeah, I am aligned, and that is, again, just like Foals, I'm willing to check out more of this band's material, especially the album that comes after this is the one that has the song I like, so maybe I'll spin that one day, but yeah, same for me. Didn't hate it, didn't love it. So, I am looking for the topic list. Is that owned by you?
It's called Theme Ideas. Is it owned by me? I can't tell.
Yeah, let me see. Theme Ideas. Oh, got it. Okay.
Now we can move another one.
It's actually owned by me. Yeah. All right. Yeah, debut albums can get moved to the bottom. Let's do sophomore albums. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh my god. That is a totally interesting, different discussion.
Yeah.
Like someone overcoming the sophomore slump.
That'll be cool. We'll do that someday. What was
You said singer-songwriter. You know I want to do that anymore.
I think we should maybe hold off on that because that's, well, I don't know. That might be too close to one person project that we did our previous episode.
It is. I thought that, but I would have been cool with it.
Okay. Let me just think.
And for full transparency, I've never listened to Elliott Smith. I was gonna take a note out of your book and jump into Unknown Water.
Oh Lord, you may have just convinced me to do it. Then I would love to talk about any Elliott Smith album. All right, let's do it.
Oh really? Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. For the chance to chat with you about Elliott Smith, I'm in. Let's do it.
I'm a newbie. I'm going to be a total newbie. I do know a bit of his story. So.
Yep. Cool. We'll have fun going down that rabbit hole, and I'll have to think about.
I hope I love him.
I hope so too. I will say no more on that. So next episode will be singer-songwriters as
I kept
the
you
topic.
honest.
I love it. Cool, man. All right. Well, I think that's a wrap, man.
That is a wrap. Any final thoughts before I close this out?
No, appreciate your time as always, and hope the listeners enjoyed some album recommendations here, and see everybody on the next episode.
See you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for dealing with us, listening to us as we continue to just go on more tangents. Peace out.